Hi everyone, and welcome to another game review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, this is my partner Maggie, and together we review games from two different perspectives, which is the way that we actually enjoy and play games, myself from a mechanics perspective, and Maggie from a very thematic perspective. Likes to have a story in her games, likes to understand why she's doing what she's doing. So if you're new to our channel, welcome, and this is a great time to join and to subscribe to the channel. Today we are reviewing a game that has been a long time coming.
Yes.
And you know, probably we've spent more time with this game than any other game. We received
By far,
Oath by Leader Games and by the designer Werle. Actually, we were one of the first people to receive it after backing it on Kickstarter because Australians got them first. And so we have had it for a long time. It was also, I should say, we did our top 10 most anticipated games from Kickstarter with Alex from Board Game Co. And it was our number one game that we were anticipating. So a lot of excitement has gone into this review. We have so many feelings about this game.
So many feelings.
So much to say.
Yes.
And we can't wait to get started. But first of all, we'll give you a brief overview.
In Oath, we are all going to be trying to be the ultimate person in charge of the throne, or I guess in charge of the land. So you're either going to be the Chancellor overseeing the empire and wanting to make sure that things sort of stay the same and everyone kind of stays put and chill, or you're going to be an exile, not particularly happy and a bit disgruntled with the empire and the way that things are being run. And so what you're going to try and do is either take or usurp the power from the current Chancellor, or you're going to create or find your own new vision of the way things should run in the land and convince people or get all the stuff together to make that vision come to life so that then you're the one in control. Or you're going to be a citizen, in which case you're pretty comfortable with the way the empire is running, and you're now more vying to be the successor or the next in line for, keeping the status quo, but making sure that you're ultimately the one in control.
Now, the way that this game plays is that everybody is going to start with a particular character, the ones that Maggie mentioned. At the beginning of the game, everything is status quo. The Chancellor has control of the game and has actually met the win condition for the game. So at the beginning of every game, there will be a win condition and everyone needs to vie for that to take control from the Chancellor. If you're a citizen, that is, you're working with the Empire, your objective might be slightly different, but the exiles have the same objective as the Chancellor and they want to take that control from them. The game, interestingly, is played over 8 rounds, and these 8 rounds, or 8 turns, which is not very many in the game, are like an inbuilt timer for everybody else to take that control or meet the win condition and take the control back off the Chancellor. If they can't do it in time, status quo, Chancellor wins.
Everything remains the same. The empire
is
untouched,
and the Chancellor is victorious. Now, the way that this works on the board is quite interesting. There's this little segment timer here in the corner of the playmat, and it's split into 8 segments. Now, each round will be moving this little counter along, and what's interesting is what happens in the 6th, 7th, and 8th round of this game. If the Chancellor still, I keep saying Chancellor, Maggie, because
I have defaulted to be the Chancellor. The Chancellor far too many times.
You are,
So now it's just I'm just now the default Chancellor.
So if the Chancellor still has hold over the empire, i.e. has still met the win condition, when we start to get to that 6th, 7th, and 8th round, they get to roll a die to win the game. And in the 6th round, they only have to roll a 6. In the 7th round, they only have to roll a 6 or a 5.
Or higher.
And then when they get to the last round, a 3 to 6 roll will win the game for them. So that creates a lot of anxiety in this game for the other players to really try and hurry and meet that win condition. Now, the win condition will be slightly different for each game, but basically the few options that there are is that you will need to have control over the locations on the board by using your
warbands.
Thank you. I was looking for the thematic name. Your army, I was going to say, the warbands to take control of these areas and fight over those areas, or you need to have ownership of some of these tiles or special resources in the game. So there's banners, there's also these relics which you can pick up at different locations of the board. Some endgame requirements or win conditions will ask you to have those in your control. And so what that creates is a real tug of war. And the way that that plays out in the game is that you will be recruiting more warbands. So you have a supply, but you need to spend resources basically to get these into your warband and build up your army. And then you will be playing that army out into locations on the board. You'll also be building two types of tableaus. So the first tableau is a very private tableau where you can store up to 3 cards next to your player board that will give you abilities throughout the game. The other tableau is constructed on the board. So each of these locations can have a set number of cards that are set up next to that location. And if your leader meeple is in that location, you are able to activate those cards to play out the action or the ability that they give you. But also if you have control over a region, you can activate those no matter where your leader is as well. And so you're really building up this like kind of public tableau as well as a private tableau, and card play is the majority of the way that you're going to be able to get things done in this game. Now there's one final thing that I do want to mention, and that is about the visions that are drawn from the deck. They can either be drawn from the world deck here or from these discard piles at each of the locations. And if you are an exile and you draw a vision, it gives you a new way to win the game, and you can reveal that at any point in time, place it on your board, and if you meet that condition and then there's one full round of play, then you win. And so that's what creates the interesting tension in the game. You can also, of course, be battling over things. So whether that is to meet your endgame condition, whether that's taking control of a region, stealing back these things that you need to win, you'll be playing with these dice. Now the dice are in 2 forms. There are the attack dice, which are the orange dice that have sometimes have a skull that will kill off your army if you... Sure. Casualties of war. And then your defense die, which are these blue die that give you a number of shields. And you can mitigate your way through these battles by having some of those cards that will build up your defense or your attack to kind of assure you the win or assure you the ability to defend yourself. One final complication is that the Chancellor, if they want to, can offer an exile citizenship, and they can choose whether they take that up or not. If both players agree, the exile actually flips their player board, which is really cool. And on the other side of the board is citizenship. You become a citizen. Now you are working on behalf of the Chancellor, trying to maintain the empire. All of your warbands change to the Chancellor's warbands, and now you have a new objective, which is to be the successor and to win the game and steal that leadership position out from under the Chancellor. Yeah. There are so many things that we think about this game, and we have spent so long writing, thinking, discussing between us, working out what we think of this game and the experience that it's given us over the past couple of months. The main thing is that in order to provide a bit of structure to this review so that we don't ramble forever, we'll start through the timeline of learning and then playing it and kind of how we feel about it now. So first of all, learning. Let's start with learning this game.
This has got to be by far the most difficult game that I have found to learn. And the interesting thing about it is as I was eventually getting it and like going through all the videos and trying to like piece it together, it's like the game itself is not that complicated. Like when you're actually playing it, once you know what you're doing and you're playing it, the game is not that complicated. There's a lot going on and there's a couple of fiddly rules, but the way that it's taught, even though they've tried to really like, there's the walkthrough version where it helps you set it up, which is really helpful. They help you set it up bit, and then it kind of gives you a sample turn for everybody, and then it's like, now go and do it. It's like, do what? I still have no idea what I'm meant to do or how I'm meant to do things.
I think that's actually I was particularly disappointed with the rule book because at the beginning they were like, hey, what's your learning style? And I was so excited by that. I was like, what? There's different options of learning for different learning styles.
Great concept.
Yeah. And so Maggie actually is a great auditory learner. You can read a rule book and kind of get a sense of it. I need to really be quite hands-on with the game. And so I picked, of course, the version where you do the setup and you do the walkthrough. But I also like to have a very clear rule book. And yeah, by the time we got through that first round, I think we did what a lot of people have done. And it's just like, okay, but I don't still quite understand what to do next. And I think that, you know, in the way that Cole Werle, the designer, has spoken about, is kind of like get into your first game as quickly as possible. But if you're a person who has a bit of anxiety about but I want to know what I'm trying to achieve, that's not necessarily an easy answer. And I will also say that we got this game so early that when we first started trying to learn this game, there were no resources. Yeah. So
it's still pretty tricky. Like it's still hard to find. Like there's now a few more playthroughs and a few how to plays, which is helpful. But it's not like it's everywhere or like super.
No, but when we got it, there was nothing, and so our perspective is always going to be from nothingness. And you, of course, will have more access to these resources. But for us, this was just such an opaque rule set.
Yeah, it's a very high barrier to entry.
And like we
play a lot of games. We learn a lot of games for ourselves. We're always the people teaching games. So it's not like we're like, off the street, have never really. So it's like we're fairly literate, board game literate.
But didn't it make you question that? Like I questioned myself. I was like, why am I? Because I tried to learn it and couldn't. Maggie tried to learn it and couldn't. And then we kind of pieced it together. Maggie did a much better job of it than I did. But there was a few things. One was the fact that the language in the rulebook is so tied to terminology and, in a thematic sense, but also that the glossary was not strong enough to explain away what they meant when they were saying, different kind of terminology that is used throughout the game. That's one thing, and that is difficult in a lot of games, but I could probably overcome that. However, the structure of the rulebook was also really difficult to look up things when you're in that first game to clarify something. It didn't have like a clarification on some of even the banners, for example.
The banners, even trying to understand like
which are a main win condition.
Two of the main win conditions.
And just trying to explain, and the language that they use on the banners and everywhere in this game is so unnecessarily convoluted. It is just
it's its own barrier.
It reads a bit like a poetry of sorts, which
it's like a riddle. It's like you're trying to figure out a riddle. And it's like it doesn't need to be a riddle. Why is it?
So, but I think that some people might be more familiar with that language style if you play a lot of war games. I don't know because we don't. Yeah. But for a regular Eurogamer, extremely difficult.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
I also felt like so many times I felt really frustrated. Like I really dislike when I feel like when I'm trying to understand something and I just feel so stupid. Like I feel like, what am I missing? What? Because it's like I am putting all of my gray matter into this right now, and it's just not coming together for some reason. And even just like slowing down, going step by step. And again, it's like we play heavy games.
We do, and we play games, Lacerda games, for example, which are very heavy, complex games. But I've never struggled so much with the rule set. I will say that PAX Premier 2nd Edition was also quite opaque for us for what is actually mechanically quite a simple game. Reading, I'm not sure if it's just a style thing or I'm just surprised that, a game of this, like obviously so much work has gone into this game. And we'll talk about the gameplay and everything in a moment. But the fact that it wasn't play tested with maybe regular kind of heavy gamers to see how easy or hard it was to interpret the rule set, is quite surprising to me.
The rule, it's like the play testing, not about the games, because I don't want to say that the game's broken in any way, shape, or form. I don't actually feel like I can say that. It's more the rule book is broken.
But it's making me it's making me so angry because I do feel great about this game, but it's making me angry because a lot of reviewers are reviewing this game who have been taught this game. Yeah. But the problem with this game is if I hadn't have been so excited about it, and we have been so excited about it, and if we hadn't have been gearing up towards this review, we might have given up.
100% I would have given up. And I have actually.
And that makes me sad.
Yeah, it's like not pack it up, sell it. So, which is a shame because there's so much to be discovered. in the game.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, it's anyways.
Anyway, we're not happy
Rant
about learning
over.
this game.
Yeah.
But let's talk about how we felt about the game.
All right. So I'll go first.
Yeah, sure.
I think having had that initial kind of like frustrating, and then trying to understand things going, it's actually not that difficult. And I kept saying to Amy every time we were going to play, it's like, oh, have we got this yet? I'm like, it's actually not that difficult. The game itself is not that difficult. When we eventually started playing it and we started kind of experiencing it coming together, and we kind of roped in your sister and your brother, and like, it's like, I think my favorite bit was enjoying that little bit where I started to understand what was happening and got to see it come to life. Because then it was like, I was like, I was the Chancellor, and I kind of understood what I was trying to protect, and I was trying to, and then all the exiles, and you saw the attitudes around the table take on that, well, sometimes that king making or queen making, or queen destroying or queen blocking, I should say, where you start getting that paranoia of why is that person doing that, and it's also always very clear what it is that we all have to kind of, who we need to target at what point, at all costs, because otherwise if we don't do it, the game is over next round. And that's something that we should say. It's like we talked about how the game can be over, at round 6, 7, if the Chancellor still has control. But it actually can end sooner if one of the exiles kind of takes that Oath Keeper.
Yeah.
No, even by the visions. Like if you second or third round, if they take control of the Oath Keeper, they become the usurper, and then they wake up and they've got that meeting condition that's done.
Yeah, I feel like we've just done the terminology thing there, because Oath Keeper is the actual goal or main win condition of that game.
Gaining the tile.
The tile.
Which is another interesting thing of like when you gain the tile, it's not like, oh well, game over. So you gain the tile, and if you're the exile, then you have to wait for it to come around to then become the usurper.
Yeah.
And then it has to you just have to stay the usurper, which obviously gives everybody else an opportunity to kind of target you.
Everybody
and like
2 turns to try and
throw,
stop you.
All the artillery at you. And sometimes, and often ganging up.
Yes.
And so that's a very interesting and thematic. I felt very thematic in terms of like, and I do feel like it just feels like that that if you see kids playing any kind of sport that has a ball, that's exactly the sense that I get. It's like there's no team organization. It's just like everybody's just chasing the ball, and then the ball goes over there and everybody's chasing the ball, and that's what happens around the table. That's what I felt. It's just everyone against you, and now everyone against you, and now everyone against
Yeah, but before we get it, like kind of how it feels, I guess I want to talk about the design and the fact that, to me, Cole Werle inspires me and makes me question what a game is and can be. And that is the highest praise that I can give in this hobby, because I'm very mechanically driven, and I love, for me, it's all about the social experience, and I love to watch how people interpret the rules and then what energy they bring to that game. And what I loved about our first few games of this is that everybody, once it clicked, everybody got on board with like trying to win, but in a way that was very thematic and felt like you were trying to take control of something. Yeah. And the timer aspect added into that makes for this very tense game that builds very quickly, actually. The first part of the game, you're kind of finding a feat, but if you wait too long to try and achieve anything, someone else is going to already be on to trying to win the game. So there's just so much happening as soon as you start playing. And those first few games were a real joy. And I got to see just how, we play a lot of strategy games and we don't play a lot of games that are high on tactics. And this game is one where you just need to be completely open. You need to be flexing your plans, but you also need to kind of build up the foundations of what's going to make you, someone that's going to be hard to stop in that game. And it's exciting. I felt so excited during the first few plays of this game. Now, I keep saying first few plays of this game because then we started to get to know the game very well. And I think what happened is there was a point at which the excitement turned into a little bit of a plateau.
Yeah, it's almost like an exhaustion of like deja vu, I think.
Yeah,
because it's like you feel like that same excitement or that feeling of the quite literal tug of war, because that's all you're doing. It's like, well, now it's not me, now it's me, now it's you. Now then it's like it's the same thing that kept getting replicated game and game again and game again.
And I think just to explain, it's like, say this banner is the way that you win. Someone will take this and have control over it, and all the other players will now be forced to focus on taking that back or taking that off them, because if they don't, that person is going to win. And so for that moment, it means you kind of need to focus less on what you're doing in order to help the greater good of continuing the game.
Yeah.
And so the focus is constantly shifting, and we had a few games where the person who had set themselves up the best actually didn't win the game because, and you know, other reviewers have spoken about this, just because you played the best game doesn't mean you're going to win the game. And
I was like the inept ruler so many times where it was like I literally won by default, even though I was probably the one playing the worst of everyone, just because I happened to be the Chancellor and everybody was kind of trying to fight each other and somehow getting in each other's ways, and I just kind of was able to cruise in the background until the game just finished, or I managed to roll the 6 the first time I got a chance to roll a die. So it definitely didn't, and this has happened in many games, it doesn't reward the best player.
And not everyone's going to enjoy that. And and the other type of game is the queen making or the king making. The king making in this game is so strong, because if you've decided that you've got no way of winning this game, and you can see that the writing on the wall probably quite early in this game, or at least when you get halfway through, you're either going to start negotiating to join the empire, or you're going to basically let someone else win the game. And it's very easy to help someone else win the game and to kind of...
And I'm going to say that's actually highly thematic, because then it becomes very much about that, like the negotiation and just like the diplomacy of it all, and who's going to be able to make the better argument. And the same with, like, you know, the offering citizenship and the making kind of deals and promises and all that sort of stuff. So that's highly thematic. The other thing I need to say is this game, and I feel like we've kind of alluded to it, the design behind it is quite brilliant.
It's absolutely brilliant.
It is unique. It is an incredibly interesting experience to discover. I would say please find somebody to teach you the game, so someone who already knows how to play it to teach you the game, or go through one of the how to plays, because trying to learn it just off the rule book it's going to be a big barrier
to that.
And it's going to impact your enjoyment of the game. So the other thing that I have to say is some of the elements, obviously we can't go into all the details of everything about how it plays, but there's so many beautiful thematic elements in terms of how the cards work, and why, obviously, you know, if the link between the factions of the cards, and why you get different benefits depending on the site or the area that you go to. The whole economy of this game, each faction has its own bank. So if you're dealing too much with one faction, it's a closed economy. It's very rare, if ever, that you're going to be reaching from the general supply. Whenever there's money or the favors in the bank, which I enjoy that. Like, I enjoy the thematic term of like money's favors, like I've got a favor, or like I'm gonna give you and same with like the secrets, it's the other thing. I enjoy that is such a closed economy, that then means that you do have to pay attention to what faction you're using or affiliating with, or because there's links between who you've got or who you play, and then banks are going to be depleted sometimes. So all of that is incredibly thematic and interesting. Same with like the travel. So things like when you travel, it costs you to go to different sites, but then the cost, even when you're staying within the same area, or some of the sites, there's the thematic detail of why you get the benefit that you get by waking up on a particular site, or why a site, you know, has relics, or why a site will prefer one faction over the other. Like, there is so much, which is where I can see how much work and thought is behind all of this. Also, when you put it out on the table, I love the presentation of this. Yeah. Like, obviously, and if you like Root or games like that, the little pawns and the your little warbands, and it's very reminiscent, obviously, of Root, the artwork. The neoprene mat is wonderful. The metal coins are just super Kickstarter coins. Yeah, but the coins, if you do have the metal coins, they're so satisfying. Even the little books, because they're such a precious, like your secrets are such a precious resource. It's so nice, so tactile. The neoprene mat is beautiful.
Yeah.
So even the cards, you know, the artwork. So all of that.
I mean, there's so much thoughtfulness that has gone into it, and so you can see just by the. I don't think we've been this animated about a game review in a long time because thematically so much thought has gone into it. Mechanically, that ties in so well with the theme, and it makes me think about, you know, the way that I play games. But I think we need to separate the fact that 100% this is a great game, but I think it's for a very niche audience.
Yeah.
And because there are a few things going on in the gameplay, and maybe you've picked up on some of them, but I just want to cover that off because is this game right for you? I think it's going to come down to, like, are you okay with that king-making kind of element? Are you okay with feeling like people are ganging up on you?
Yeah.
It's
99% of this game, particularly as it gets going.
There is some luck involved in this game. Obviously, whenever you're rolling for battle, you can mitigate against that, but there is luck in the game. And ultimately, it is just one big tug of war. Like, there is just power shifting around, and some people want to focus on their own strategy and what they're doing in a game.
Multiplayer solitaire,
and build up, an engine or something like that that has less to do with the shifting of win conditions and that type of thing. So this is not going to be for everyone. And added on to that, the complexity and the overhead of learning the rules. And I think you have a product now that is unfortunately a little bit unnecessarily kind of difficult to get into, and then because of that reason, a lot of people aren't going to be able to work out whether it's for them or not, unless you have someone, a friend who has it and can teach you, which is going to be the best way to give this a go.
To add to that, so as someone who loves the multiplayer solitaire experience, one of the reasons I sort of my enjoyment of the game started to plateau and even kind of go down as we got into like probably games 8, 9, 10, and it was kind of becoming more like, okay, well now the discovery element for me is a little bit over, because like I love turning over like the different sites and going, oh, what's going to happen, and getting kind of bringing in some of those new cards and seeing that. As that started to become like, okay, I know what to expect, then I started finding myself frustrated when it was, inevitably one of those turns where it's like, well, the only thing for me to do is go after this person, because if I don't, they're gonna win, and that's gonna be the end of the game.
You're
when
bored by
really,
that.
I was so bored because well, I don't want to do that. Like I don't care about. I want to build something, or I want to create something else, or I want to
And actually, it can take a long time to get back to you as well. That is one thing that I wanted to mention is, people are working out how to spend all of their supply, so they're doing multiple actions per turn, which can lead to a bit of downtime. So you are waiting for it to come back around, and then sometimes your turn is only going to be to collect some coins, and then you've got to wait again. And so that is also not going to be for everyone, I don't think. But I want to talk about the legacy element of this game as well.
Chronicle, technically.
Yes, I know. So, but people will refer to it as a semi-legacy component where what happens in one game transfers over into the next. Now, the biggest impact of that for us is really the way that the deck shifts. So, depending on which cards the winner, or which suit the winner has used the most, more of those cards will get added to the deck for the next game, which means that suit becomes even more powerful. And while that's interesting to me, it's not enough to hook me into wanting to get that subsequent game onto the table. I was surprised, and I wanted it to feel more like, ooh, now that we've changed this, how is it going to play out in the next game?
It's almost like, for all the noise that you made about wanting to overthrow the empire and for things to be completely different, now that you're in power, it feels exactly the same.
Wait,
it's kind of like,
that is very much like politics.
That is exactly, that's very thematic. Because it's like, and that's sort of like completely agree. It's like, I almost wanted it to feel very, very different from game to game as that state changed. And and there are things like edifices, or kind of like landmarks that get built, and as you said, like the balance of the different factions is shifting a little bit. overall the experience is still very similar, obviously depending on, what role you end up taking, because that also changes obviously depending on the previous game. But
But I also want to say that, it's good in a way because anyone can then jump in and it doesn't need to be the same group of people. This is a game that does reward probably the same group of people playing together because of the familiarity with the game, the ability to manipulate things and take control is going to get better the more that you play this game.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that's a little bit frustrating at the end of every game, it does take 15, 20 minutes to kind of set up for the next game.
Yeah.
To pack it away, you need to do a few steps that again just
it's kind of fun because it's like you have to, it's like ceremonial in a way because you have to vow an oath and you have to then like go through the whole kind of deck shifting, and then there's some cards that are then kind of...
But honestly, most of the time you were doing that by yourself. Everybody would leave the table and Maggie was setting up for the next game.
Good night, everyone. I'll just be here until 1 a.m. packing this up.
Packing the game away.
Yeah. I enjoyed, though. There's the Oath Chronicle book.
Yes.
And so you were very good at every time like chronicling like what happened in that game. And I very so that was really nice.
That was really fun.
Yeah. So after we played all the multiplayer games and we kind of understood now how things work. And I was like, okay, well now I'll go and try the solo and learn the Clockwork Prince so that then we can also try it at a 2-player count. And oh my goodness, it was like all coming back to me. all the frustration and all of the I feel so stupid and I don't know what's going on and I cannot for the life of me. Let me see, I've got very handy right here all the different forms that this sort of takes place. So with the Clockwork Prince, you have this in theory, very handy A4 sheet, which what would that be, like size 6 font, double-sided, not a single image inside to explain or give you some context as to this is what this means or this is where this goes. And then you have the mind of the Clockwork Prince, which is this flowchart that I believe is based on, again, war games sort of thing. So if you're familiar with that, you'll probably be like, oh, yeah, this makes perfect sense. This makes no sense to me. And even trying to read this and reread this and going like one point at a time and going, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, go to the red dot. There's a million red dots. Like, which red space are you talking about? Like, what is happening? So I have not played this solo and not for lack of trying. I tried to understand
tried very hard and got very angry.
I got very frustrated. We have our own Clockwork Prince, which is our dog that is then constantly like, at set hours, he needs to be fed, he needs to be walked, and he's a bit of a prince. And so I was like, I would rather spend my time playing with this other Clockwork Prince than with this guy. So I don't know. I don't know what the solo experience is like. I hear that it's potentially a little bit fiddly and a bit tricky and but I can't say. So
and Maggie was so upset because she wanted to be able to review it from a solo perspective, and it just got to the point where I was like,
I was defeated.
And we need to talk about this, and the fact that we couldn't get into it at a 2 or solo player count is, if that's the only option to you, okay, but this game is meant to be about player interaction, and so this game requires a lot of people at the table. It's just going to be better that way. So even if it was an amazing Clockwork Prince and we could work it out, it's probably not going to be able to replicate what is so great about this game.
Yeah. The other thing is, even as a multiplayer game, the bits that I enjoyed the most personally were that discovery and finally kind of going, oh, this is how it works, and then going, oh, cool, yeah, this is like, a tug of war sort of thing. That's not what I enjoy about a game in general. Like, that's not the type of game that I enjoy, and I did find myself very frustrated, kind of going, well, there's nothing, I feel like I have no control. At one point you said, it's like you don't get control over what you can do to win. Like, it's very clear, there's only essentially one thing that you should be doing.
Yeah, well, I was comparing it to Pax Pamir.
Yeah.
And so Pax Pamir is a very tactile game and a game that I absolutely adore.
Yeah.
Because the win conditions are not asymmetric, like people don't have lots of win conditions. So it still feels like you have control of the very public win condition. And when it changes for everybody.
Yeah.
Which means that everybody can then work towards the new goal.
Yeah, adjust.
And you've got control of the center board kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. To me, I prefer Pax Pamir over this game. I really enjoyed this game for what it was. I quite enjoyed the dice rolling, to be honest, and that's not something that I'm usually into, but you could kind of factor in whether you were likely to win or not, and I enjoyed that because it's not a huge part of the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if we'll keep this game. I'll tell you the tension about this. On one hand, it is absolutely brilliant.
It's genius. The behind the scenes, the design, it's like a beautiful mind sort of behind the scenes.
And I love this Kickstarter edition in particular, which makes me want to hang on to it from a collector's perspective, from a respect for the design perspective, from is this going to make it to our table maybe even ever again? I highly doubt it. I feel like we've played it out, and I do feel like because it's one of those games that, if I forget a rule because I'm coming back to it in 6 months, I don't know if I have the stamina to find what that rule should be, or the energy to go back through into that rule book. And that's the disappointing element of this game. But, again, we'll probably keep it because we are a bit of, I'm a bit of a collector. I do enjoy it. We really did enjoy our time with it once we got into it.
Yeah.
And so I hope that...
And I think it's like, it depends on the person. Like if you love that tug of war, if you love that king making sort of thing, or queen making, or queen blocking, then this is definitely for you. If you love those kind of tactical war games sort of stuff, then go for it. And I have no doubt that there'll probably going to be, additional expansions and additional all sorts of different things to make this world
and at that
even
point,
bigger.
maybe we'll revisit it. But I hope that this review gave you the context or understanding of what it's like and what it feels like to play this game, whether it's right for you. But that is finally our review of Oath, and we will be back with more board game reviews soon. But thank you so much for tuning in and bearing with that very long description.
So rambly, so sorry about that. But also sorry, not sorry, because it's like we had a lot of feelings.
We had a lot of feelings, and we had to air them all. And now we can move on with our lives. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with more reviews soon. Bye for now.
Bye.